You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, I'm getting this question a ton. Can the Republicans outside of the courthouse be charged with obstruction of justice in their effort to help Donald Trump circumvent the gag order that was put in place? So we're going to explore that question. But first, just a quick reminder for those watching right now, Glenn and I are doing daily comprehensive coverage of the entirety of Trump's trial. So if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. Okay, so Glenn, back to this question of obstruction of justice. I want to show a quick clip here of Republican Bob Good.
And they've got this gag order against him. That's why we went up there, so that we could say the things that this corrupt judge is not allowing him to say. This is a judge who seems to get all the high-profile conservative trials up there, and his own daughter is raising tens of millions of dollars for the Democrat Party off this very trial. So you've got a corrupt judge, you got a corrupt prosecutor, you got a corrupt ex-con star witness who's perjured himself multiple times over. And we wanted to make the case for the president. We've got his back.
Okay, so obviously, that's him admitting outright that he is helping Donald Trump, and the rest of these Republicans are helping Donald Trump kind of create a workaround to this gag order that was put in place. Can you speak on whether these Republicans have any legal exposure under that charge of obstruction of justice?
Yeah, Brian, it brings to mind a phrase that we use so often in the practice of criminal law. We talk about whether something violates the letter of the law or the spirit of the law. There's a gag order in place that prohibits Donald Trump from making statements or, importantly, directing others to make statements about witnesses or jurors, about the judge's family members or the prosecutor's family members. So the question becomes, what can be done about all of these red tie wearing sycophants? Most of them seem to be auditioning for, a vice president on the Trump ticket. I maintain that probably the only question they would have to be asked in the interview to see whether they're vice presidential material for Donald Trump is, are you willing to be hanged for me? I mean, it boils down to that, right?
Yeah. Getting
back to the serious. What they're doing probably violates the spirit of the law, the spirit of a gag order. Is it obstructing justice? Well, obstructing justice is basically corruptly interfering in the due administration of justice. You have to specifically intend to interfere with an ongoing investigation or prosecution. And I think whereas they're violating the spirit of the law and the spirit of the gag order, it would be really tough to prove that they were violating the letter of the law or the letter of the gag order. Now, if there was any evidence that Donald Trump directed them to make these statements, that would allow for two things. One, Donald Trump could again be charged with criminal contempt of court for violating the gag order by directing others to do so. And the members of Congress and the others who are making these statements being directed by Donald Trump could actually be charged with conspiracy to commit criminal contempt of court because they were in a corrupt agreement being directed by Donald Trump to violate the gag order. But as much as I would like to say, these members of Congress who stand up there with the obvious intent to try to somehow help Donald Trump to the detriment of the due administration of justice, I'd like to say they could criminally be charged. I think it very unlikely. But there's one sure way to find out, Brian, and I've urged prosecutors to do this before. Present the evidence to a New York grand jury and let them make the decision. A prosecutor has a responsibility to make sure they, first and foremost, are convinced that there's a violation of the law, and they can begin presenting evidence to the grand jury and see if the grand jury agrees. I have urged people to do this when Jim Jordan, for example, tried to interfere in state court prosecutions, both in New York and in Georgia. Boy, I would love to see a Georgia grand jury convened to see whether they believed Jim Jordan's antics of ginning up these false investigations into the way Donald Trump is being prosecuted in state courts. I would love to see if a grand jury believed that was obstruction of justice, because this old prosecutor thinks it looks a whole hell of a lot like obstruction of justice.
Well, Glenn, the whole point of this gag order that was put in place was to prevent Donald Trump from kind of hurting the integrity of this trial and making witnesses too afraid to testify, making the judge afraid to preside by virtue of threats against his family. So that's why Donald Trump can't testify. But aren't these Republicans doing the exact same thing by kind of standing there in Trump's stead, literally dressing exactly like the guy and doing the exact same thing, basically showing that the full weight of the Republican Party is going to attack anybody who does, dare serve as a witness in this trial, is going to continue attacking the family of the judge? And so doesn't it kind of serve as the exact same thing? Or is it just that Donald Trump has some rights limited or curbed by virtue of being a criminal defendant, but these people don't, and so they have, full reign of their First Amendment rights still intact?
Yeah, you put your finger on it with that last comment. Donald Trump is under the supervision of the court, and therefore a judge can order him to not do certain things that other members of the public might be free to do, like say all kinds of horrible things about the jurors and the witnesses and the family members of the judge and the prosecutors, because those other people are not under the supervision of the court. They're not litigants in this criminal proceeding. So unfortunately, they can get away with it. But what they're doing is basically trying to damage the due administration of justice by proxy, because the judge has ordered that Donald Trump can't do it. So they're just going to go ahead and jump in and do it for him. But, there are other ways to attack some of what we have heard these members of Congress saying. So, Brian, let me just circle back for a minute to the clip of Congressman Bob Good, those, by all accounts, despicable things he was saying, including about Judge Merchan's daughter. And then let's talk about if there might be an opportunity for him to be held accountable, even if it's not for a violation of the gag order or for obstruction of justice. Here are some of the precise words Bob Good spoke. He said the judge's daughter is raising tens of millions of dollars for the Democrat Party off this very trial, close quote. I'll tell you, I would like to see, perhaps in a defamation suit, proof put to the test on whether Judge Merchan's daughter is raising, those are his words, tens of millions of dollars off of this very trial. Now, if there is an ad campaign that was put out by Judge Merchan's daughter saying, I want you to donate or help me make or donate tens of millions of dollars off of the very trial my father is proceeding over, okay, no defamation. Do you really think that that was a truthful and accurate statement by Bob Good? I'm betting it wasn't.
Glenn, from your perspective as a 30-year former federal prosecutor, if you were in the Manhattan DA's office and you saw this happening, where basically the exact thing that you were trying to prevent Trump from doing by virtue of attacking the witnesses, the judge's family, seeing these Republicans step in and do it for him, what do you do in that scenario?
There's probably not much that you can do. I'd be frustrated as all get out, because my sense would be that these people, were Donald Trump surrogates who were trying to interfere in the due administration of justice. But listen, I am also a First Amendment fan, even when the speech is a bunch of BS. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's lies. It's misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, like these Republicans have been spewing, right? They've been parroting the exact things that Donald Trump has been saying. The thing is, we've got our First Amendment rights. They are broad, they are sweeping, and they even protect lies and nonsense like this. So I don't know that you can step in and threaten criminal charges or ask Judge Merchan, for example, to expand the gag order to people who are not parties to the trial. I don't think he has the lawful authority to do that. But, if I did believe there was adequate predication, in other words, enough evidence to open a grand jury investigation and begin presenting evidence to see if there were any violations of New York state law involved in what these representatives, these members of Congress have been saying, I would sure open a grand jury investigation and at least explore whether a New York state statute was being violated.
And I would just note, too, that we are not without agency in all of this. The reason that Glenn and I do these videos on a daily basis is precisely to rebut the disinformation that these guys are spewing all day. So don't feel despair because as if this is not being met with any pushback, because that's why we're here every day. That's why everybody in the progressive media ecosystem is doing this on a daily basis, to push back against these lies that are kind of spewed out by the right-wing media ecosystem, by these Republican lawmakers on a daily basis. So, don't feel like it's just happening in a vacuum and that we're not doing anything to push back against it. That is the point of what we're doing in these videos. With that said, if you want to watch more, the links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.